Hey guys, this is God of Politics. We'll get to a brand new video, but before we get started with this video, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also follow me on Twitter and join the Discord. Those are both linked down in the description, especially my Discord server. We've got a very interesting and fun mock government server there, which if you like this channel, you'll certainly like the Discord server as well, so I encourage you all to join that. But getting right into the video here, I am going to be talking about the upcoming primaries, especially in Arizona, for August 2nd. Now, August 2nd is one of the biggest primary days. It's the biggest one we've had in a while, and we've got a lot of interesting primaries. We've got 5 states, including Arizona, Kansas, Michigan, Missouri, and Washington. But I would argue the most interesting is in Arizona. We've got both the Senate and gubernatorial races, but of course there are a lot of other races. We've got a ballot initiative in Kansas. We've got a House primary in Washington, Senate primary in Missouri, gubernatorial primary in Michigan, and we have, of course, as I said, Senate and governor in the state of Arizona. And I will start by talking about the Senate race in Arizona, where we currently have Mark Kelly, who is the presumptive nominee for the Democrats, running unopposed for the second time. He ran unopposed in 2020 when he wasn't even an incumbent, which is pretty impressive here. But looking at the Republican primary, we can see here that Blake Masters has opened up a pretty strong lead, and he entered the race pretty much as a nobody, but he has been steadily rising pretty much this entire time, and he's now at around 30% with an 11-point lead in the RCP average here. The second place candidate at the moment, undecided. Now, I think this is somewhat proof that the primary is not over yet, that Blake Masters has certainly not won it all yet, but I'm going to say that he is favored, and my prediction is that he is going to win. Now, I'm not going to do too many predictions for this primary. I'm not going to predict every single race, but I do think that Blake Masters will win the primary. I don't think it's going to be by a massive margin, but I do think that he will win the primary when it's all said and done. The high amount of undecided is not great for Republicans just in general in terms of winning this general election. You don't want disaffection amongst your voters heading into a general election, especially when the primary is this late. You do want to be able to coalesce your voters into a general election campaign. And when you've got 27% undecided and you're winning the primary with, 30, 40% of the vote, you're not in that great of a position. But regardless, I do think Blake Masters will win the primary, with Jim LAMON coming in second, Mark Brnovich coming in third, and Michael McGuire coming in fourth here. Blake Masters is not the best candidate Republicans could get by any means. He is certainly a very controversial figure, and while most rating services rate this as toss-up, I think if Blake Masters wins, most of these rating services will maybe reconsider that, maybe not move it from a toss-up, but certainly consider that Mark Kelly is in a better position than he would otherwise have been had someone other than Masters won the primary. And now if we look at these polls, we can see here that, Mark Kelly is up by a lot in these polls, but again, you can't trust these polls too much. So, it is what it is here. But we can see here that Mark Kelly is winning against all these candidates. But, Blake Masters is certainly not the best candidate. But looking at the gubernatorial race here, we can see here that it is more of an open race. But on the Democratic side, it is, again, less contested, of course. We've got, 3 candidates running, but really everyone knows it's going to be Katie Hobbs, the Secretary of State who won her race in 2018. She'll get above 50% of the vote as well, but it is not good news that undecided is so high. Now, we haven't had many polls. We haven't had any polls since May as well, but still, actually, we only have 2 candidates at this point. Lieberman suspended his campaign. I didn't even know that just because everyone assumes that it's going to be Katie Hobbs running, but a high amount of undecided is not great there as well, but that could just be due to the quality of the polls, which could be a reason for the high number for Republicans as well. But on the Republican side, we have had more polls. I mean, they're not even polling the Democratic side, but we can see on the Republican side they are doing more polls. And we can see here that Kari Lake, the Trump-endorsed candidate for governor, has been rising as well. When the race first started, we had 75% undecided. She was, I guess polling in first, but with 10% of the vote, not much of a lead, to be honest. But, she has gone more up as the months have gone on, and of course the Republicans have tried to stop her by having certain candidates drop out and things like that going on. Matt Salmon withdrew from the race to try and help Carr and Taylor Robson, but it looks like at the end of the day, Kari Lake is going to win. She's winning by 7 points as of now, and I think she will win by a smaller margin than Masters will, but I do think that Kari Lake is still favored. I think it's going to be a narrow victory, but a victory nonetheless. You do have less undecideds here, 19% versus 27% for the Senate race, so, that is certainly notable, but that is still a high amount of undecided that could show that Kari Lake could still lose this race despite having a 7-point lead. We've seen 7-point leads, not turn into a victory before, especially in primaries, which are notoriously inaccurate for many polls in many states. And Arizona is, I could see, an example where this could be an example where the polls end up being quite off. But at the end of the day, I do think Kari Lake will win, albeit narrowly. She has the endorsements. She has, I think, the biggest base of support, having a more conservative platform, and I do think that at the end of the day she is going to win by a narrow margin, but I wouldn't be surprised if you lose. But we can look at this race in Missouri as well, where we had Eric Greitens, Vicky Hartzler, Billy Long, and Eric Schmidt being, those main 4 candidates. And, you can see here that Eric Greitens, who, started off in the lead, had the lead for most of the time, or at least until, earlier this year, has now lost it, and he's really fallen off a cliff, to be honest. It looks at this point like Eric Schmidt, who is the Attorney General, is going to win this race. We have less undecideds here as well, so, only about 10% here, so it looks like that's pretty solid for the Republicans as well. Democrats, aren't really, they're running a candidate, but it's not going to be close like 2018, like 2016, like 2012, which wasn't even that close, but the Democrats won it that year. But overall, this is not going to be a race that's competitive, but the primary is still interesting. And I guess you could say one of the final statewide elections that is, between candidates that's very notable is the Michigan gubernatorial election, where you've got Gretchen Whitmer, who is, of course, going to be unopposed in the primary. I'm not even sure if she has any opposition. No, she doesn't. You can see here she doesn't have any opposition. But in the Republican primary, of course, there was this whole big debacle over the signatures, which, eventually got James Craig and a couple other candidates kicked off of the ballot. Now we've got Tudor Dixon, who is endorsed by Trump, who pretty much came out of nowhere. I mean, she was polling at basically 0 for a while, below 5%, but she's really shot up in recent months. Undecided has gone down, and even before they got kicked off the ballot, those candidates, undecided was very high. Republicans have not nominated their best candidates in Michigan, and most rating sites do rate this as a pretty decent chance of a win for the Democrats. A lot of these races are listed as toss-up, but only 2 of them here listed as toss-up, Fox News and RCP, which tends to overestimate the competitiveness of a lot of races. But, lean D, I would expect it to be a fair rating for this, especially after Tudor Dixon, who I expect to win the primary, does win it. 29% other, but given the momentum in this race, I think a lot of that other vote, that undecided vote, will end up going to Tudor Dixon. She's got the Trump endorsement. She's got the momentum. She'll end up winning by a pretty solid margin. In a general election, she's not going to be the most formidable candidate. I believe Michigan could be one of those states where the party that does well in the midterms doesn't actually do that well. Democrats do have an opportunity to flip a seat in the 3rd district. Republicans probably going to win the 10th district with John James. The 11th district, which is also going to be a very interesting primary between Haley Stevens and Andy Levine. That should be a very interesting primary as well. If we can just scroll down to that here, we can see here Andy Levine and Haley Stevens. That's going to be a very interesting primary. But Michigan could be one of those few bright spots for Democrats in the midterms. I think Pennsylvania has the possibility of being one of those states as well. But given the way it's shaping up in terms of candidate quality, in terms of a lot of other factors, fundraising, a lot of the polls we're seeing, Michigan could be a pretty good state for Democrats, despite it probably not being a good environment overall. So we've, looked at Michigan, looked at the state of Arizona, looked at the state of Missouri. Kansas has, a competitive attorney general primary. You've got 3 nominees running, including Secretary of State or former Secretary of State Chris Kobach, who ran for governor and lost in the general election, kind of blew that race for the Republicans, and then he ran for Senate and lost in the primary. They stopped him from blowing that race, even though he probably would have won anyway. But Kansas also, I believe, has a very important ballot initiative. Yes, it has a very important ballot initiative over abortion, which should be very interesting. I believe most people had said, and I probably agree, that the side of restricting abortion, giving power back to the legislature is probably favored, though I'm not going to make a prediction for that because we don't have the most solid polls. It's more of a toss-up. So I'm going to say that's a toss-up. I think, either side could win that, though looking at the fundamentals, you probably would say that restricting abortion would win, but you never know, and so that's why I'm not going to make a prediction over it. But you've got a very interesting race there in Kansas as well. Kansas, Michigan, Missouri, Arizona, and then the final state being the state of Washington, where you've got the Senate race, which, a few people have said is going to be competitive. It's not going to be competitive. Maybe one of the closest Democratic states that is above 10 percentage points outside of those, most talked about ones, Colorado, Arizona, the standard ones that everyone talks about. But Washington could have the possibility of being slightly closer, was closer in 2010, but it is by no means going to be competitive. But you do have the jungle primaries here, which is going to be at play in the 3rd district, where you've got Jamie Herrera-Beutler, who is a more moderate figure. You could argue she did vote for the impeachment of Trump in the 2nd impeachment trial here, and she is running against a very conservative Republican candidate, Joe Kent, who has been endorsed by Trump. Now, because of this jungle primary system, it gets very interesting. Now, I guess if you're Herrera-Beutler, the best thing you can hope for realistically is probably to have, of course, you finish first, a Democrat finish second, but a scenario where Herrera-Beutler finishes first or second and Joe Kent also finishes first or second is probably not the worst for her, given that she will get most of those Democratic votes and a decent chunk of Republican votes as well. Of course, we have the possibility that 2 Republicans are going to go against each other in a general election, but it could also be 1 Democrat, 1 Republican. Beutler could get locked out. Kent could get locked out. So there's a lot of factors at play here. I'm not going to make a prediction for this because it is harder to predict. We've, of course, had, Trafalgar polls that show whatever they show, but, they're tend to be, they're accurate in some races, inaccurate in others, and I'm not going to base a whole prediction off of just that, but it's going to be a very interesting race to watch. I hope you enjoyed this video talking about these very interesting races, because this is one of the best primary days that we do have for the rest of the primary season. Then we've got general election campaigning, and the election, is going to come quicker than many think. It seems almost like yesterday that we were in 2021 talking about the Virginia races. We're not talking about the 2022 midterms, which are finally, approaching. But anyways, thank you for watching this video. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, follow me on Twitter and join the Discord. Those are both linked down in the description. But again, guys, thank you all for watching this video, and I'll see you guys later.